Foreign Affairs will come to order. Everyone welcome. Without objection, Representative Conley of Virginia and Representative Ivey of Maryland are waived onto the subcommittee for the purpose of questioning the witness at today's hearing. Without objection, the chair may declare recess at any time. I recognize myself for the purpose of making an opening statement. On day one of his administration, President Biden signaled to the world through words and actions that our borders are open, and so they were. Our country has since watched the crisis along our southwest border devolve into a catastrophe, a humanitarian and national security catastrophe. The deteriorating conditions along the southwest border and mismanagement of resources have harmed law enforcement and made existing staffing challenges even worse. Just last month, the Department of Homeland Security Office of the Inspector General issued a report examining how law enforcement at Customs and Border Protection and Immigration and Customs, Enforcement have been negatively impacted by historically high levels of illegal immigration and other operational challenges. For this audit, the DHS Office of Inspector General surveyed over 9,000 DHS law enforcement personnel within ICE and CBT. They collected information from Border Patrol agents who protect our border from illegal entries, Office of Field Operation officers who guard our points of entry, enforcement and removal operation officers who enforce immigration laws, and Homeland Security investigation agents who investigate cross-border criminal activity. What they found is shocking. 88% of ICE and CBP law enforcement personnel who responded said their work location was not adequately prepared and staffed during migrant surges. 71% of CBP personnel and 61% of ICE personnel stated that their current work location was not adequately prepared and staffed even during normal operations. But there's nothing normal about the current border catastrophe. As noted in the IG's report, migrant encounters at the southwest border have risen from approximately a little under 1 million in fiscal year 2019 to 2.5 million in 2022. This fiscal year, through the end of April, CBP has already made 1.4 million encounters along the southwest border, with 1.2 million of those coming from Border Patrol agent apprehensions of illegal border crossers. Each of these encounters represents law enforcement resources expended in arresting and processing those individuals, and those resources are being used up at the expense of enforcement. The Inspector General's report highlights a 300% increase in the number of known gotaways, meaning migrants who evade apprehension entirely, in fiscal year 2022 compared to 2019. Last year, there were more than 600,000 known gotaways recorded by CBP. In one Border Patrol station reviewed by the Inspector General's audit, 15% of the gotaways over a 5-day period evaded apprehension simply because no agents were available to respond. Think about that. I mean, people are showing up at the southern border even though we know they're there. We don't have anybody who can show up and process these people. These challenges have left the men and women on the front lines of this crisis overwhelmed and stretched to their limits. To meet mission requirements, DHS implements stopgap measures like increased overtime and temporary details that exacerbate staffing challenges in the long term by eroding morale and jeopardizing retention of experienced law enforcement professionals. Today we hear from Inspector General Cuffari on his office's findings about the reality of the problem, how DHS is managing these staffing challenges, and recommendations to solve the staffing crisis. Since 2016, DHS Office of Inspector General and the Government Accountability Office have issued 25 reports examining staffing issues at our border, but 80% of their recommendations have been closed without yielding tangible results at DHS. In fact, DHS did not concur with one of the 3 recommendations in this report, appearing not even to be willing to acknowledge the impact of temporary details and overtime on the workforce. We must hold DHS accountable to achieve critical mission goals, including ensuring border security, enforcement of our immigration laws, and facilitating lawful trade and travel. And that means DHS must successfully manage law enforcement resources and support the men and women who carry out these essential functions. I want to thank Inspector General Kafari for appearing today, and I look forward to working with his office to ensure continued robust investigation of DHS. I'll tell you, I've been at the border several times. Last time I was down there 2 months ago. It was shocking the degree to which we did not have enough people to deal with particularly would-be gotaways coming across the border. And that's why we have this drug crisis in our country. But in any event, I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Garcia, for the purpose of making his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for convening this important hearing. I want to just start by just noting that I hope that we can all commend the Biden-Harris administration for their actions to prevent a serious disorder at the border following the expiration of Title 42, which I believe was the right decision. As a proud immigrant myself and a patriotic American, we certainly have to focus on a humane and secure border, but also have legal pathways to let people continue to come to this country and be part of our experience. We know that immigrants make our country stronger, and we are a nation of immigrants. Congressional Democrats and President Biden have taken clear actions to improve border security. We have provided unprecedented resources to the men and women who protect our borders, and President Biden has implemented numerous policies to bolster the health and well-being of border security. Now, House Republicans, on the other hand, have opposed greater funding to frontline agencies, including Customs and Border Protection, and House Republicans have called to defund our federal law enforcement agencies, claiming oftentimes and weaponizing them to further political agendas. Now, Democrats know we have a responsibility to support the well-being of all federal employees, and as mayor of Long Beach, California, I work closely with all of our employees and was proud to have the support of our local police department. Today, I'm glad we're addressing concerns of federal law enforcement agencies. The work that they do is very important. But I believe we have a responsibility to support all federal employees who serve our country, and that's everything from DHS to the U.S. Postal Service. However, today I'm very concerned that we're holding a hearing today on the basis of a flawed report and with a witness with a problematic record. Now, Mr. Kufari is a witness who repeatedly refused to comply with this committee's requests for meetings and information, and he sought to block congressional oversight at every turn. It is actually ironic that we are dealing with a politicized and problematic report given his own department's staff morale challenges. Now, on September 23rd, 2022, a letter was published that was drafted, and I quote, by concerned DHS OIG employees representing every program office at every grade level. The letter claimed that Inspector General Kufari, quote, no longer has the support of his workforce, end quote, and that staff fear retaliation if they speak up about the multitude of issues at the office. Staff made the startling claim that DHS OIG, quote, will continue to fail under the IG's disastrous leadership, end quote. Now, the concerns about this witness go on and on, from his resigning under ethical concerns earlier in his career, allegations of deliberately delaying essential oversight reports, and alerting and covering up critical investigatory facts. Now, we all know that the Inspector General is currently under investigation by the Council of the Inspector General on Integrity and Efficiency, CIGE. Now, but rather than cooperate with legitimate oversight efforts, the Inspector General has filed a lawsuit against CIGE in a desperate attempt to escape scrutiny or consequences for failures and transgressions. Now, it is unacceptable that the individual entrusted to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse in our third largest executive department believes that he is above the law, believes that his office is above scrutiny from Congress, and believes that he is beyond reproach for his own potential perpetrations of fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, under Inspector General Kufari's leadership, the Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General has developed a pattern of flawed and misleading investigations, including a failure to report sexual misconduct and harassment at DHS, and a failure to investigate and disclose to Congress missing Secret Service text messages from the January 6th insurrection. I would also like to briefly address the report on which this hearing is based, a report that is misleading, non-representative of the broader agency, and deeply flawed. The DHS Office of Inspector General claimed that the purpose of their work was to gain insight into staffing. Instead, the report made sweeping generalizations about morale at CBP and ICE. The report has mathematical errors and misleading tables and graphs. DHS OIG even states that their work was conducted in accordance with, quote, generally accepted government auditing standards, with the exception of data reliability. And I don't know about all of you, but with the exception of data reliability, seems like a pretty big exception to me. Now, we need an IG in place at DHS who is able to perform high-quality audit work with integrity, objectivity, and independence, or we will never have the accountability and transparency that we need and that we deserve from this agency. We should expect better. I look forward to this hearing only for the opportunity for our members to raise long-standing concerns. We have serious challenges to address at our borders, and I look forward to building solutions to address them. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I'm pleased to introduce our witness today. Joseph Cuffari was confirmed by the Senate in the Department of Homeland Security to be the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General in July of 2019. He was previously a policy advisor to the Governor of Arizona, served in the U.S. Air Force, and spent 20 years at the Department of Justice. In 2013, he retired from his position as Assistant Special Agent in charge for the Office of Inspector General in Tucson, Arizona. I want to thank Dr. Cuffari for being here today, and I look forward to his testimony. I was down in Tucson sector for, I think, the third time in the last 4 years, and I'll tell you, I am glad you were in that position, and look forward to hearing from you and your testimony. Pursuant to Committee Rule 9G, the witness will please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Let the record show the witness answered in the affirmative. We appreciate you being here today and look forward to your testimony. Let me remind you that we have read your written statement and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Please, if you can, limit your oral statement to 5 minutes. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it's on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 4 minutes, the light will turn yellow, and when the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired. I recognize you to please begin your opening statement.
Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss Homeland Security IG's critical oversight of DHS. Prior to my unanimous confirmation in 2019, I served more than 20 years with the Department of Justice IG in various offices along the southwest border. For 10 of those years, until the establishment of DHS in 2003, DOJ IG oversaw the Immigration and Naturalization Service and its component, the U.S. Border Patrol. I personally observed 3 special Border Patrol operations in which INS detailed agents to the southwest border, and I investigated financial irregularities related to one of those operations. As I promised Congress during my confirmation process as Homeland Security IG, I prioritized oversight of border security and immigration. My first visit to the southwest border was within 2 months of my confirmation, and since then I personally traveled to the southwest border 9 times to review DHS operations and border conditions. These trips have encompassed all 9 Border Patrol sectors from San Diego, California to the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. In addition, my senior staff or I have visited the northern borders of Washington, Michigan, New York, Vermont, and Florida's maritime border. During my visits, I've engaged with senior law enforcement and frontline personnel to better understand how DHS can enhance border security and fight corruption. I've also received situational briefings from NORTHCOM, SOUTHCOM, U.S. Army North regarding active and reserve components assisting at the southwest border. My testimony today will focus on CBP and ICE's management of resources and discuss in our recently published audit about the health and morale at CBP and ICE. We conducted this audit to determine the extent to which DHS is effectively managing law enforcement staffing resources. Our audit work included analysis of attrition rates, succession plans, and physical observations of 31 facilities. We also interviewed and surveyed law enforcement personnel. We determined CBP and ICE's current approach to staffing is neither effective nor viable long-term. Despite greater workloads, staffing levels of both agencies have remained relatively flat since 2019. CBP and ICE have relied on the use of temporary duty assignments, overtime shift work to surge staffing along the southwest border, a practice that dates back to at least 1994 with the creation of the INS's National Border Strategy. Although CBP and ICE annually assess their staffing needs, neither agency has assessed the impact of these details on their operations. CBP and ICE have initiated programs focused on the well-being of their agents and officers. Both components could benefit from a more strategic approach to resource allocation. We heard from more than 9,000 law enforcement personnel. That represents 16% of the 57,000 who we surveyed. Our analysis of the survey comments indicated that many recipients felt that current staffing has negatively impacted their health and morale. CBP and ICE cannot continue to use temporary duty assignments and overtime shift work effectively to meet the challenges at the southwest border. We made 3 recommendations to help DHS strategically assess the issues we identified. DHS concurred with 2 of these recommendations and did not concur with 1. In total, during my tenure, we published 51 reports and made 145 recommendations specifically aimed at improving DHS Southwest Border Ops. I'm very proud of the quality and quantity of the work by more than 700 professional career DHS employees have produced under my leadership. As I reported since the fall of 2021, DHS continues to delay and deny OIG access to information that DHS is required to provide it to us and that we need to do our jobs. I remain hopeful DHS will improve their responsiveness to our requests for information so that we can continue to provide Congress and the public robust, timely oversight like that being featured in today's hearing. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my prepared remarks. I look forward to the subcommittee's questions.
Thank you. Right on the button. I'll give you a few questions. Law enforcement staffing at the southwest border is facing a systemic crisis, one that the Department of Homeland Security doesn't have a coherent plan to address. Why did you decide to initiate this report, and what are some of the biggest challenges our law enforcement agents and officers face at the southwest border that your report found?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So starting in around March of 2021, when it became safe to travel post-COVID, I began to visit the southwest border again. I began to hear from line law enforcement personnel and senior staff that there were morale issues impacting the workforce. And those issues related to the deployment of Border Patrol primarily from the northern tier offices to the southwest border. I asked my staff to conduct a review, and they did so within a year and a half, and they completed the report in May of this year.
What were some of the mental and physical consequences of the current work conditions of DHS's law enforcement officers reported? That DHS's law enforcement officers reported?
According to the law enforcement personnel who actually have been doing these details, the constant flux of being transferred to the southwest border from the home station for 30 to 60 days provides a lot of turmoil to the agents and their families. In some cases, they don't know where on the southwest border they're going to be detailed and or for how long they're going to be there. Once they complete their initial assignment, they return back to their home station where they're back working where they were originally assigned. And then 30 to 60 days later, they get notified again that they're going back to the southwest border. So it's a constant churn. It's the unknown effects. And according to their respondents, they have developed an inability to continue to do what they consider to be their primary law enforcement function.
One of the issues addressed in your report is temporary detailing, which is the practice of temporarily assigning agents and officers to different locations for a period of time before returning to their permanent duty station. Many Border Patrol agencies and Office of Field Operation officers can be detailed from their duty locations to assist with custody and processing of migrants. One Border Patrol agent said in your report that agents were providing clothing, diapers, formula, and other domestic services, noting that the job feels more like social worker duties rather than law enforcement. How can DHS improve their detailing practices to make sure the detailees are actually performing jobs within their job description?
It's a function of the first recommendation that we made to DHS, what they did not concur with, which was to hire an outside national academy to take a look and develop a strategic staffing model so that DHS would be best able to use the resources they have to the most effective benefit of the organization.
Does the practice of temporary details leave home duty stations vulnerable or understaffed?
According to the agents who responded, yes. There is a gap when you pull resources from one area to another.
No question, and anybody who's down at the border knows that. What are the current staffing levels at ICE and Customs and Border Patrol compared to their authorized levels?
I believe I don't know the exact number, Chairman. I'd have to get that number to you.
Okay. How many Border Patrol agents and Office of Field Operation officers do we need to address the issues we are dealing with today?
That's a matter for the department to decide based on the recommendation number one that we made to have an outside entity take a look at their organization to have a strategic staffing model.
I'll ask you, in a 2-year period, we went from about 20,000 people coming across the southern border to about 220,000 per month. Isn't that kind of part of the big problem, that they haven't adjusted the number of agents for the huge number of people who are coming over here?
There certainly has been a significant influx of migrants coming into the southwest border. The staffing levels for ICE and CBP, although I don't know the actual numbers, have remained relatively flat. So as
Okay. How does the turnover rate within DHS's law enforcement agencies compare with other government agencies?
Their turnover rate, from what I recall from our report, is consistent with that of other agencies in the federal government.
Okay. Okay, very good. We'll now call on Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.